Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Faces of NextGen Live. My name is Melanie McComb, the Shamrock Genealogist, and I'm here with Brooke from Reclaim the Records. Welcome,
Hi.
Brooke. Hi.
Hi. Thanks.
So, welcome to our show where we interview genealogists like yourself and where we're going to ask some questions and find out more about you. I think a lot of people are interested to see who is the woman behind the curtain at Reclaim the Records, which is your big organization.
Thanks. Well, we're excited to be here and talk to everybody and answer questions, and let's get started.
Okay, great. Well, when did you get started in genealogy?
Well, I got started doing this like around at age 18, 19. It was the end of my freshman year of college, and I was sort of procrastinating on studying for finals. And I came across a website that had a number of extracted Polish Jewish records online called JRI Poland, jri-poland.org. Great, totally free search engine that had taken information about old Polish records and put the basics of them online, and then you had an order button to actually get the copy from the archives. And it was amazing. It blew my mind. I had never been into genealogy before that. So my entrance into genealogy was the actually not true experience of, oh, well, of course stuff is going online and is in search engines, and you can search for names on partial names, and of course it's online. That was my assumption going into this. And of course that created the false impression that, well, everything else is going to be online too, right? Of course it's not online. And if anything, though, it created the expectation, well, things will eventually get online. So that was freshman year of college, I would say like early 1998 was the end of freshman year of college. And I kept getting involved and building out a family tree. I had known some of my great-grandparents. I didn't know all of them. Some died before I was born. All of my grandparents were born in the US. Some of my great-grandparents were born overseas. Some were born in the US. And I started building a tree. I got pretty lucky that a lot of the towns my family came from, a lot of the records did survive. That was a nice surprise. But all of my family, like 95% of my family, came through New York. My family is Eastern European Jewish, immigrated to New York mostly between 1880 and 1900, roughly around there, like really early on. And the records I wanted in the US were in New York, in the New York City Municipal Archives for the most part, or to some degree the New York City Clerk's Office, things like that. And I figured, well, someday those will go online. And the years went by, and the someday never came.
Yeah, we're laughing 20 years later, and we're like,
I know. No, it's literally 20 years later now, from spring 1998 to spring, summer now, 2018. And eventually it got to the point where, like, this is not what is going on here. Why is New York, of all these different places, such a records out of? And it was compounded by when I met in college. Also, I met my boyfriend, who became my husband. We got married in 2003. I was a baby, and we moved to California. He's from California, and we've lived out in California ever since. And so from California, I'd kind of like stare back across the country in New York and be like, those records I want, they're going to go online this year, right? Or you're going to let like somebody scan them for you and make a deal with an archive, right? And year after year, nothing was happening. And other areas of the country were getting a lot better at putting their stuff online, or making deals if they didn't have the budget to do it themselves. Other whole countries were putting stuff online. Poland started flat out scanning all their old books, beautiful high definition scans, completely free, no DRM. Other countries started doing this too. I think Ireland did it, and Czech Republic, and a couple places really were getting with the internet revolution. And New York had nothing. And I got frustrated. And I have two young kids now. I have a 7-year-old and a 10-year-old. And I knew I couldn't really just pick up and fly across the country to New York to go sit in the archives and crank the microfilm readers. I'm like, this is ridiculous. There's got to be something better. And if 95% of my family had not been in that building, basically, I probably would have concentrated on something else. Right. But at some point, it's like, why can I get records out of like these tiny little towns in Poland and Ukraine? And that's no problem at all, because their archives made deals, and as soon as they step off the boat in America at Ellis Island, there is no records online. This is insane. So, as you probably know, I founded Reclaim the Records, and what we do is we take on archives that have not put their records online, either because they don't have the budget, but more often because they didn't want to. They didn't want to lose control of the records. They didn't want them online, which is nuts. And we use the Freedom of Information laws to make them give us copies. So this started sort of as my personal vendetta, my personal goal was to get some more records out of this one archive, the New York City Municipal Archives, that was notoriously bad about public access, but it spread from there. Because as I learned, there were many other areas of the country that had similar problems. There were other archives and other agencies or departments of health that had not shared their records, that had, maybe they had them in one format that was very old-fashioned, like microfiche. Maybe they wouldn't let anyone see it at all, even though legally there was no reason not to. These were pretty old records.
Right.
And it spread. And eventually what used to be my own little pet crazy project became a nonprofit. And this is our second year as a nonprofit. We're a 501c3. And we have a lot of balls in the air juggling right now. And we're just spreading joy wherever we go.
Yeah, I think your organization is great. I think it would be interesting to know how can someone get started with doing like a freedom of information request? Since you mentioned that's how you go and get the records. What would you give as advice for someone that maybe needs to do a request? Maybe it's like a military, record or something else that you think that should be available by now, but still hasn't been released out.
Good question. Okay, so I had to sort of teach all this myself from scratch. I didn't know what I was doing. I'm not an attorney. My parents wished I had become an attorney, but I didn't go to law school after all. I shut that down. I went into tech. So I sort of taught myself. And these freedom of information laws, it's important to note there's the famous one that's for federal agencies, and then there's the much less famous, but still very important state laws. The federal one, which most people have heard of, is FOIA, F-O-I-A, the Freedom of Information Act. You can only make a FOIA request of a federal agency like Department of Justice, the FBI. We have one that's about to probably go into a lawsuit against Veterans Administration, Veterans Affairs rather. Another one that's probably going against Social Security Administration. Like those are all federal agencies.
Right.
What I started with was the state one. So for someone who's doing this for the first time, you might want to start with a state, or for your state, city, local archive is a state law. Every one of the state laws has a totally different name. So you have to start by saying, what do I want to get? And what is the state law that governs this? Let me read about that particular state law. They're all pretty similar from state to state, but this way you'll just concentrate on one law and learn it really well. I started with the New York State Freedom of Information Law, F-O-I-L, not F-O-I-A, FOIL. And I read all about it. Most of your state laws, they might be called a sunshine law. They might be called an Open Public Records Law, Open Public Records Act, Public Information Act. Utah's law is GRAMA, which is an acronym for something, Government Records and Management something. Just find out what is the law in the state you're looking at. You don't need to be a state resident. There's one or two laws, there are one or two states where they try to make it like you have to be a resident of our state. But there's ways around that. You can contact me if you want to know. Originally, go anywhere. Don't worry about it. And you look up that law. And so you have your state law on one hand, and you also have to look up your state vital records law on the other hand. You look at both of them side by side. Say, okay, is there anything in either of these two laws that says that this thing that I'm trying to get is absolutely exempted? It's just too private. It was specifically named as, no, you cannot have this. It usually is not named. It's usually like, no one said you couldn't have this old marriage index. They never thought about it. So therefore, the presumption is, yes, it should be a record that you could get. You have to find out who has the record you want. It's usually a municipal archive, a state archive, might be a state agency, it could be a county archive, you have a clerk's office. You have to figure out who has it. You should know that some of the records you might want are, what would you consider judicial records? It could be like a will or anything that comes to the judiciary. Still judiciary, you may not be able to use these laws to get them because a lot of the state laws don't cover the judiciary. However, if those old records, like an old wills, old mortgage books, things like that, if they've been transferred to your city, your state, or county archives, then they're not in the judiciary anymore. They're considered like with the rest of the stuff that's covered by the law. So that works then. But for example, old divorce records in New York State, you can't really get with this law. There are ways you could use other laws to get stuff out of the judiciary. In New York, it's called Judicial Law 255. We haven't used it yet, but we're hoping to in the future. Other states, it depends on your state. You should just do a lot of research on your state law and on your state vital records thing. As I said, I don't have a legal background. I Google everything. I just Google stuff and I read it. And a lot of it is aimed towards journalists. They're aimed towards journalists who also are, fresh out of college and don't know what they're doing either. And you can just read about it. Sometimes there's government agencies who are set up specifically to help people in that state use their state freedom of information law. New York has one. New York has a group called the Committee on Open Government, COOG, COOG. And I stumbled on their website, and it's incredibly helpful and totally free online. They put all their opinions online. They tell you, yes, a zip code is fine, but this is not okay. Like, this is considered not too personal information. There's no problem releasing a zip code. Or, they have that for so many types of information. And they can give you free advice. So if you're just starting out, don't worry. You can ask people for help. There may be groups that they say they're there to help journalists, but they'll help you too. If you ask them, everyone's been incredibly nice that we've dealt with. And hopefully nice for you too.
Do you find that it's easier to request an index versus the actual records and the images, given privacy laws? Like, do you find at least just saying, like, I just want an index to know if my family's in there, and then I can go from there and go for the agency. Do you find that approach is easier than trying to request the actual record sets?
Oh yeah, that's definitely what we've been doing so far, is like saying, like, I'm not, well, there's two reasons for that. One is it can be somewhat legally more restricted if you're trying to get actual certificates, even if they're very, very old certificates or old licenses. So it just, from a legal point of view, most of these states may have put sort of carve-outs in either their vital records law or their state freedom of information law about how private vital records are, actual vital records. And they'll use phrases like birth certificate, death certificate. Sometimes they'll mention marriage. Marriage is sometimes in the court, so is not covered by that. But they often forgot, to our great joy, to talk about the index, the finding aids. A couple of states, like one or two, unfortunately did mention the index or any extracted data, but most of them just never mentioned it. And in cases in the past, like as in New York, they have ruled in the state courts over the years, thanks to journalists using this law, oh yeah, the basic index with basic information is generally fine. The other rule is that if you're sitting in an archive, and you could use it if you were in that building, but you're not because you live somewhere else and you can't get there, then it's already open to the public. You were already able to sit there and crank through the microfilm, whatever old format it's in, but you just didn't have a copy at home or on the internet. They've kind of admitted there's not a privacy restriction because you already saw it. You sat there and saw it, or you could hypothetically sit there and see it. So that's probably not something that's restricted. So an index tends to be better. The other reason that an index tends to be easier and better to get is not about legality. It's sort of about tactics and strategy. A lot of the archives don't like what Reclaim the Records is doing already, and they certainly would not be as willing to help us if they thought we were taking away any money from them. And their budgets have been slashed to almost nothing. They are fighting for their staff. They are fighting for every dollar they get. I do feel badly for a lot of them. They are not given the respect within their organizations there. And for them, they make money off how many actual certificates, vital record certificates they sell. Like they'll say, like, okay, it's $20 for a birth certificate. And they charge for the search too, which is dumb because a lot of times now we know what the index number is. You don't need a search, but whatever. Or we'll charge you for, say, $10 for a copy of an old voter registration. They set prices and that money goes right to them. They need that desperately. So one of the reasons we have not gone after yet specific certificates, the actual underlying records as much, is not just a legal reason. It's also like, let's leave them something so that we are not cutting them off at the knees.
Right.
Let's try to make it clear to them, like, if we publish your index, you'll get more orders for the certificates, so you'll make more money, and we got the index and everybody's happy. That's, I think, a better way to go about it.
Exactly. Yeah, I definitely think that helps. You're basically just giving them an option, being like, we're going to go after the records. We can at least, make it so that, it's profitable to you in this regard to cooperate, basically.
Yeah. Yeah.
So when have you started working with Family Search? I understand that they've been helping out with a lot of the digitization once you get to the records, help prepare them online.
They have been fantastic. I had no connection to them whatsoever beforehand. Back when I had won my first Freedom of Information lawsuit, or won the settlement in the lawsuit, and I wound up with a table full of microfilms for the first time ever. They had never been outside of the New York City Municipal Archives before, and suddenly they were on my kitchen table in California. It was like, this is great. I conquered the hard part, which is getting the records out of the archives and explaining to them legally they had to give me a copy if I paid, which I did. And finally I got them. but they're still in microfilm format. You can only get the record format they have. If they only have microfilms, you can ask for a microfilm copy them if they'll have a vendor scan it for you, but it's going to cost like 3 times as much at least. So I got the microfilms. And I contacted Family Search because someone I knew had the email address for David Renter, who's the head of Family Search, and I didn't know him at all. I was very nervous writing my email, like, hi, Mr. Renter.
He's very nice, so.
That's I've learned since, which is good. I wrote him just a very nice email, like, hi, Mr. Renter, you don't know me. I'm a genealogist. I don't actually have any credentials after my name, but I got records out of New York City. I knew nobody had really done that. Yep. And I have them, but they're in microfilm. What I originally said to him is, Family Search, do you guys want a copy of these so you can put them in the Granite Mountain Vault, which is the big vault they have built into the side of a mountain near Salt Lake City, south of there, where they store all sorts of really important genealogical documents. And I thought, this way at least I'll know they exist somewhere outside New York. They exist somewhere. There's a backup copy. And he wrote back, and he was so nice. And he said, yes, we would love to make a copy and put them in the vault. Would you like us to scan them for you?
Oh
my gosh, yes, thank you so much. So I shipped them to Salt Lake City. They paid the shipping. They scanned everything on their professional grade equipment. They did all the labor, all the work. They sent it back to me with a hard drive of beautiful, high quality scans. And that was the first time I'd ever dealt with Family Search in any regard. And so ever since, whenever Weekend of Records gets records, we don't always get stuff on microfilm, but a lot of times we do. We ask them. We don't have any expectation that they have to say yes. I always make it clear, like, you don't have to feel like you have to say yes, but we would be so thankful if you did. And at least I know you'd have a copy too.
Right.
And they've said yes all these times. It's been phenomenal. They're so kind. I love talking to them, and because they love records too. And it's so great to get to talk to people who don't just love genealogy, like I think we all do on this webcast, but who specifically love the art of, like, let's get those records. That's a really cool, like, hole in the knowledge base out there in the world, and let's concentrate on that, pull that out of there. That's what I love, is getting the information out of specific little buildings in old-fashioned formats and making sure it's going to live forever on the internet and in the vault.
So what are some of the record sets that you were successfully able to retrieve for anybody that's not familiar with your work?
Okay, we've gotten a bunch. And it started mainly in New York City, as I said, because it was just started as my personal project. I didn't think this was going to get this big originally, but we are expanding. Now that we are a nonprofit, we are really trying to expand our reach to go into other states, other cities. I will always be doing some parts in New York. Every year there's going to be some New York projects, but we are doing other stuff too. So successfully, we've gotten the New York City Marriage Index, the index to all their marriage licenses. We started with 1908 to 1929. We continued 1930 to 1995. We continue with another lawsuit, 1996 to 2017. We're about to launch another records request for the Domestic Partnership Index for 1993 to the present. We wanted to make that a really complete marriage index, and that wouldn't be complete unless we included everybody in the marriage index.
Definitely.
We also have gotten so many things. We got the index to everybody who was registered to vote in New York City in 1924. So it's a list of all their names broken down by their district. We have gotten the New York City Geographical Birth Index, which is going to be ready finally very soon. It took a long time to scan. The films were in bad condition. Our copies of the films were brand new films they had to make from the masters, but the originals were not done great so many years ago, so we had to work with what we did. And again, Family Search very generously stepped up and scanned these films, and it's been doing the QA on the quality, and we're so thankful for them, because that's like 110 films right there. That is an index to everybody born in New York City, but it's sorted geographically on 3x5 cards. They listed the address at the top and put all the births at that address in chronological order. So if you know your family lived at a certain address, maybe you can look up somebody who's been missing. You've been missing their records all these years by that. We have gotten New York State stuff too. New York City and New York State are completely separate vital records jurisdictions, which is crazy. But both New York City,
New York has to be different, you know.
Yeah. But New York City and New York State, they've both been bad about putting things online. Like, great, they're two separate districts, and both districts have been terrible about responding to things. So in the case of New York State, we've been dealing with the New York State Department of Health, which is not an archive, it's Department of Health. But for years, they've been publishing the basic index to births, marriages, and deaths in New York State outside the city. And they published them on old-fashioned microfiche sheets, which you could borrow at certain libraries only in upstate New York. They never put, or also at NARA in Manhattan. You could not borrow them anywhere else. They would not give you anything. It was insane. So we made freedom of information requests to New York State. We have gotten the New York State Death Index. It's now online. I can tell you right now, we have gotten the first half of the Marriage Index. It's not online yet. I got the hard drive. They only sent us the Marriage Index through about 1967 or so, 1967, 68. And when I finally got it, I called up the woman who is the records access officer, like, hey, I asked for this through 2016. Where's the rest of the records? You never said something was being withheld. They're supposed to tell you if they withheld.
Right.
And she just said, oh, no, we can't give you that index. So the marriage records in New York State, all over the state, are completely closed for 50 years. I said, yeah, the record's closed for 50 years unless both spouses are dead and you can prove they're dead. But the index is not, and I actually quoted the law about that in my request to you. It's a 1993 law where neighbors sued New York. Personally have sued New York City 3 times over that exact law, and I won. I won settlements all those times. The index is open, and the lady from New York State says, well, if you have a problem, you can just file an appeal. Are you kidding me? You're going to waste your money on this, really? And I reminded her that Governor Cuomo signed a new law this year, but this legislature had just passed, saying that if a government agency does not turn over some certain records under a Freedom of Information law request, they're responsible for the attorney's fees. So I was trying to explain to her, like, you're really going to make me do this? I cited all my legal reasoning. You're going to have to pay for this. I don't think she was used to people talking back to her like that, but anyway, so that's about to become a lawsuit where we're going to go for the second half of the New York State Marriage Index, like 1967, 68, wherever we left off, through 2017. Again, just the index, not asking for actual certificates, just something we know is legally available and which we've already literally legislated that. We've already litigated that case 3 times in New York City. We're getting pretty soon the New York State Birth Index through about 1942. And that, again, from the New York State Department of Health. Again, it had been on microfiche sheets for a long time. And the fiche, I think, only went up to 38. We were the ones who pushed to 1942, saying, like, that's pretty old. You should give us that. Outside of New York State and New York City, we've got the New Jersey Marriage Index, 1901 to 2016 or 2017, one of those 2 recent years. Okay. We just got the New Jersey Death Index for the first time ever. Go to NewJerseyDeathIndex.com, check it out. Some of it we got as image format, some of it we got in text searchable database format, but we got a lot of it. We're missing a couple years because the New Jersey Department of Health was missing some of these years. Even though it's their job to keep these records, they apparently didn't have it when we contacted them under the Open Public Records Act request. So we're trying to supplement with records from the New Jersey State Archives, who are wonderful to deal with. And for years that we can't find the missing index years. The certificates still exist, but not the index. We're going to see if maybe there's some way we can make them recreate the index for the missing years, because that's ridiculous. They're supposed to do this. It's their job. We just got some Connecticut records, which have not been public yet, but you can all hear about this on this broadcast. We got, through somebody who has worked with us several times, we got about 20 years of an index for Connecticut. I won't give more details yet, but really soon we're going to announce those. And it's only 20 years, and it's just an index, but it's something that was never online before. And we asked for it, and we got it. So that was cool. They didn't fight us or make a problem or anything.
That's great.
Yeah, and other states. We actually have a lawsuit that's pending in Missouri. It's been dragging on for almost 2 years. It'll be 2 years around Thanksgiving. And we just had our second round of depositions where we deposed their Department of Health people. And that will hopefully go to summary judgment next, I believe is our next step. And at that point, we'll see what happens. That is a request for the Missouri Birth Index and the Missouri Death Index. Just the basic index, the basic thing to know, is there even the guy I'm looking for, does he even exist in your records? I may not be legally entitled to get the copy of that record. We're not challenging that, at least not at the moment. We're just looking like, do you even have him in the index? Right. And the birth index and death index is just given name, surname, and date. They wouldn't even add on columns for the gender or for the certificate number. Never mind even the county, which would have been nice. So we're just trying to go state by state and look for more things. We actually got a number of things from Wyoming recently. We talked to the Wyoming State Archives. They were totally nice. We have not publicly announced them yet, but they are on the Internet Archive. If you peek, there are Wyoming records. It's the index again, the index of deaths, marriages, and divorces. The reason we didn't publicly announce them yet is we really still have to do QA to make sure I uploaded everything correctly. They gave us a large number of records on microfilm, which Family Search very graciously digitized for us. And then I took the digitized copies and I had to sort them into by year based on how they were on the roll. And I need to double check my work to make sure I didn't accidentally leave some of the records out. And it's just a time consuming process. So that's the only reason we haven't announced it yet, because I can't be sure that I haven't missed a couple records here or there. But if you want to go check it out, you can check out the Wyoming Death, Divorce, and Marriage Indexes on the Internet Archive.
That's great. And is that your main repository where you're uploading if you're not creating like a separate site? I know like you said you created like New Jersey for deaths, that you have your own website for that, but like you're uploading all your record sets to Internet Archive?
Yeah, every time we get records, we're almost always getting either something else to images. Either we're getting like a hard drive full of images, microfilms that can be turned into images, a USB stick full of PDF files, which are the PDFs were made from images. New Jersey likes to do it that way, things like that. The Internet Archive is archive.org. It's not archives.com, it's not archive.gov, which is NARA. It's archive.org. And they're free, and they're awesome and amazing, and you can upload anything you want to them. They love hosting books, hosting music, hosting playable video games. You can play the Oregon Trail on their website for free in your browser, which is so much fun. And they're basically like a giant free hard drive if you're uploading something like decent. So I created multiple collections within a Reclaim the Records master collection. Like, for example, there's a New York NYC Marriage Index is a collection within Reclaim the Records there, and I just uploaded all the images I got. And it's free, but it would cost me or our organization, now that we're an org, a lot of money to host this kind of data, and they'll do it for free. And that's wonderful. They're a library. They're a nonprofit themselves. So every time we get images and stuff we posted there, we might link to it from other sites, like from our site. When we created the New Jersey Death Index, NewJerseyDeathIndex.com links to the links where the images are on their site. But we have that one page now that sort of is the overall, like, here's how you find everything.
Oh, okay.
Page. So we're going to keep uploading stuff there until they tell us to knock it off, because it's free. It's a way then that anybody else can go and download these images. Everything we get has no copyright. No copyright, no usage restrictions, no data restrictions. Like, do whatever you want with it, because it's not ours either. That's what we're trying to say. These were everybody's records. Our taxes paid for these all these years. They were always all of ours. I never needed to ask permission from an archive or a Department of Health, like, permission granted from the blah, blah. Well, no, I can cite my source to say that's where I got it from, but it's not theirs. They don't own it either. Everybody owns it. They always have. So everything we put online is always, clearly marked, this is public domain. The one thing we ask is, if you do reuse it, like if you're a commercial genealogy website and you download some stuff and you make a text searchable transcribed version of the images, which is great, just stick our names somewhere in the About This database box. Like, add one sentence at the end, like, we got these from Reclaim the Records, who got them by making a Freedom of Information request from Department of Health, or whatever it is. That's it. I can't enforce that legally, but it's a nice thing to do. And there's really only one company out there who's ever had a problem with that. Everybody else, for-profit or nonprofit, has been totally fine with that as like their only requirement to get records. Yeah.
Well, hopefully we can encourage that. I mean, all we can do is just put our best foot forward and get the records and ask them, please attribute, cite where you got your access from. Please give a thank you, because you guys did do a great job, and you should get the credit for it. So,
I mean, like, it literally costs $0 to be nice, but even that might be asking too much from some people. Anyway,
so we have a couple questions in the chat here. So one question we had from David Lambert at NEHGS, he wants to know, are we going to have any? Do you have anything in the queue for Massachusetts? He said that birth indexes might be an issue, but what about like the marriage and death indexes?
We have so many parts of this country, we don't even know where to start. Like, we have so many balls in the air because we have a lot of projects that are about to become lawsuits or already are lawsuits and things like that, that we have to sort of catch some of those and get that finished before we move on to more stuff. This is like an infinite number of projects out there, because sometimes it's just the county who's having a problem. A particular city archive just does not want to let you see the actual index book, even though it's a public book in a public library or public archive. We have not tried anything really for Massachusetts yet. As far as I know, Massachusetts is an open record state for the actual records. It shouldn't really be a problem. However, I've heard that there's one place where you can go to get the index where you have to be there in person with very limited operating hours, certain days of the week. Like, you can be there at that one place between 2 to 4, and you have to pay to go in the building to see public records. Like, that doesn't seem right. That should just be on the internet already. It's ridiculous that it's not. So we'd love to expand, and we'd love to work with other genealogists and other organizations who have a better idea of all these other areas of the country where we need to get stuff and get it out there. Another example people have brought up to me a lot is Wisconsin has some ridiculous laws where you can see stuff in person, but you can't get it on the internet for some reason. Even if you're there, it's totally unimpeded. But if you can't put it on the internet, or, oh no, it's on the internet. Again, we're just talking the index. That's an issue. Other states we're looking at for the next year, for 2019, Maryland State Archives has wonderful things on site, and Maryland is one of the rare states where their open records law, their Freedom of Information law, I think in Maryland it's called the PIA, the Public Information Act. It does cover the judiciary, unlike a lot of other states. So we could potentially get naturalization stuff out of Maryland. I mean, there's so much stuff out there. Manumission papers. I mean, there's so much stuff stored at so many archives that just should be online. Sometimes these archives would love to put stuff online. They're not trying to be obstructionists. They just don't have the money and the time, and I do feel bad for them. But if we're coming to them as a nonprofit saying, hey, we're going to file a Freedom of Information request for you, you'll charge us the actual cost. We pay for the copies. We make it cost you guys nothing. All you have to do is say, yes, we're going to follow the law and we're not going to fight you. And then 12 months down the line, maybe 18 months down the line, you'll finally have an online copy of those records, whether they're original records or they're an index. All you have to do is follow the law. Please don't make us fight you anymore. And you would think that would be easy, but it's like 50-50 if they're going to give you a hard time or not. And some places are great, some places are not great.
What about Delaware? We had a question from Teresina.
I actually know absolutely nothing about Delaware. I'm sorry, but just there's so much out there. So I would love to know. And these are things that people can do research on. We need help everywhere. We need people on the ground who are looking at specific things to tell us, okay, I need a death index for such and such date. There is one for these years, but there isn't one for these years. I need people to look at the vital records laws, and also look at whatever their secret information law is. Compare the two. Is there anything in there that says anything about an index being closed off? Is there anything that says anything about the original records being closed off? If you could you go to the Delaware archives and see them in person? If yes, that's a really good sign. We might be able to get a copy of their microfilms. Or if they've already digitized it, we can just get their hard drive. I mean, we'll pay for a hard drive copy and for the labor to make a copy from A to B. That's all it is. It's just making sure it's legally okay, making requests, making sure they actually answer the request, never mind answer in the proper time frame. You have to really answer these things in maybe about 5-10 days, depends on your state. Make them understand, like, we're not trying to be jerks, but you, the archive, you're not like doing us a favor by doing this. You're actually doing your job by doing this. And I know you're probably not used to genealogists making Freedom of Information requests. I know you're probably used to us being like pestering you in person, but no, this is a real thing. We're really going to use the law. And if you say no, we really are going to sue you. I'm so sorry, but we really are going to sue you because sometimes there is no other way. I'm not that sorry, but
So would you recommend, if someone was like, let's say, looking at one of these states like you weren't sure about or you haven't taken on, like Delaware, would you recommend they do the research and then follow up with you and then ask, would you like to take this on, or would you help advise them basically on what direction to go if it's a smaller record set or if you think that they'll have more success on their own?
You could try doing it on yourself. You're absolutely welcome to, and then we could always completely redo your steps if something didn't work out, but it might work out great for you. Some of the stuff we've gotten lately is because a genealogist took it on himself to do this stuff, and it worked out great. There's a guy we work with sometimes named Alec Ferretti. Hi, Alec, who lives in New York. He's an undergrad. He's a grad student doing a double master's degree in like library science and archival stuff, and he's also a genealogy nut like us. And he's also like a NextGen type. You know, he loves this stuff. He's younger. He loves hanging out in archives. He made the request for Connecticut, that thing we're going to announce soon. He made the request for New Jersey. You know, and sometimes it doesn't work out, but we're happy to back him up at that point if it doesn't work out. But he's the one doing the legwork because he wanted more records. And so he did the exact same prescription. Look at the vital records law using Google. You'll find it. It might be listed under the Department of Health law. Look at the Freedom of Information law, whatever it's called for your state. Do research on it. Compare the two. Is there anything that says you can't get this? And could you potentially see it on site as an extra point in your favor? And if all those stars are in alignment, then yeah, you can go get it. And he's wrote the requests himself. Writing these requests is totally free. Even making an appeal is free. Talking to government bodies that do with like the Government Records Commission Council in New Jersey, or the Committee on Open Government in New York, also free. They want to help you. They don't want the state to unnecessarily spend money, so they'd rather try to be mediation before you get to that point. It's only at the point if you've dealt with somebody who just does not want to follow the law, who just does not want to hand over records, that's when you have to sue. But even then, you can get your money back, at least your attorney's fees back. Can, not definite. Every state's a little different, depends on the situation. New York has luckily gotten much better about that. As I mentioned, Governor Cuomo signed a new law this year, which is why we're doing so much gung-ho stuff in New York this year. It's not just that I love New York and I want my New York records. It's also, I suddenly realized, like, I can take these guys to the mat and I can have them pay my attorney at the end of the day. So why wouldn't I?
Right.
So.
No, that makes total sense. And it sounds like you've definitely had a lot of impact. I'm seeing some folks in the chat that are saying that because of the work you've done, they've helped find their ancestors' records.
That makes me so happy.
We had Jenny that said that she found her grandparents' marriage records thanks to you. So you're getting a lot of kudos. I think everyone's just trying to figure out how they can help. So definitely, it sounds like you're telling people to research and do the request yourself.
It's totally worth a try. It's fun. If you totally mess up, you spent no money at all. So it's worth a try. I would say start with something kind of old. Start with something ideally that you know you could see on site if you were there, but you're not there. We've gotten stuff that no one's been able to see before, like, for example, those New Jersey death index stuff, like the Connecticut thing we're about to announce, like nobody's ever seen those. So it doesn't have to only be, oh, I could see it there, but that makes it a lot easier legally. Start with a small record set. I started in New York. I started with the New York City marriage, the index to marriage licenses, which are different than marriage certificates, long story. The index to marriage licenses from 1908 to 1929, which is all at the time, that's all that they had in New York City Municipal Archives. I picked it because it was an index. I figured legally that would be easier. Tactically, it would be easier because I was not going to be taking money out of their pockets. If anything, it gave money to them because there were more orders after that went online. And it was old, 1908 to 1929. It was so old, they had sent it to the archives. So I knew that was a good start before I started getting a little harder and asking for more modern years, or asking some places for records that you couldn't see on site, things like that. So do the same thing I did. I did no idea what I was doing. I look back at my original Freedom of Information request and like, I'm horrified. Like, what was I writing all this crap for? Just get to the meat of it and go on. You can do it too. And maybe you'll run into like a really friendly archivist who might be a little confused why you're asking it this way, but they might get the point. Once you pointed out that you're really, in the long run, kind of helping them get their stuff preserved and digitized, and like a backhanded way to get stuff digitized that they would not have had the budget for otherwise.
That's great. Yeah, and that New York City marriage license index, that was a godsend. I actually used that, and I actually got one of my records from that. So that was one wonderful way to start. So
yeah. It could be anything. So like, if you want to help, if you don't just be like, oh, Reclaim the Records is doing cool stuff, which is great. Thank you for saying that. But you're Reclaim the Records. You can do this too. You can write Freedom of Information requests. You know what's available or not available in the places you're researching. Write a request. Say, give your legal reasoning. send it in. They're supposed to respond in a certain number of days. You'll have to read your state law. It's like 5 to 10 business days, not regular days. If they don't respond on time, which they probably won't, it's already a little bit of a check mark in your favor if you need to go to an appeal or a lawsuit down the line. So sometimes it's not so bad if they don't know what they're doing either and they start, breaking the law in their response or non-response. Maybe they'll be great about it and they'll call you up out of confusion and be like, you want copies of what? But let's say, for example, it goes well. Let's say you're getting something relatively old and the archive you're talking to, city, state, county, says yes. They're going to charge you. They're going to tell you, but they can only tell you the actual costs of making the copies. If it's paper copies, your law will probably fix the maximum at either 10 cents a page or 25 cents a page.
Okay.
If scans, most of them will let you do a scan. They might charge you 25 cents to 50 cents. Again, so you have to either check the law or just check what they're doing. Sometimes the law didn't get updated, to move forward to the present when scanning is available. If it's microfilm, they have to make it at the actual cost of making a microfilm copy, which in New York is like $35 or $37 per copy, which is really cost effective because microfilms can hold 500 images, sometimes more depending on the formats. 500 images for $35 a roll, that's awesome. If you get to the point where they're giving you good signals, like, yeah, I think we'll give you a copy under this law, even though I can't imagine why, then just talk to us. At that point, if you think you've gotten like a deal from an archive, come talk to Reclaim the Records and say, hey, I have dealt with the blah, blah, blah county library, and they're going to digitize all this stuff for us, and they're giving us a quote based on the actual cost of digitization with an outside vendor for $4,000. I mean, it depends how many books there are. Do the books need to be photographed? Are they already on microfilm? Is it already scanned? Is it just in newspapers? Tell us what it is. And we have a budget now, which is great. We became a nonprofit, a 501c3. And people have been incredibly generous about donating. And we use that money to go pay for the records we're getting to get them. Or if you're getting like microfilms or something, we can go talk to groups like Family Search to say, hey, so-and-so got the microfilms. Would you want to help them digitize? And again, they're under no obligation, but they've been super nice about helping us digitize things that were in microfilm formats. So, we'd love to help. And if they're giving you trouble, legal trouble, come to us too, because we will start looking for attorneys. We can pay for the attorneys. We can start making inquiries. We want to be a clearinghouse, a helpful resource to all sorts of genealogists who want to get these records and don't know how else to do it.
Are you interested in having anybody volunteer for Reclaim the Records? I see there's a number of people in the chat that are mentioning that they'd be willing to help create some kind of like guide on how to do these kind of requests state by state. So
that would be awesome. Yeah, we're open to any kind of help. This started from nothing, and we need everybody's help to make this, to spread the word too. I mean, if nothing else, one thing you could do is just tell other genealogists you run into, especially if they're not active on social media. Like, yes, there are ways to get around the archives saying no. The archives acting like they own the records, which they don't own them. They're just the caretaker of them. There's a difference. Tell people about that and make this become a more widespread thing where we as genealogists are not stuck in this position where we're like begging archivists and begging librarians and begging Department of Health people for access to our records. That doesn't feel good, and it's not a good power dynamic because those are our records. Our taxes paid for them. Our ancestors' taxes paid for them. They're about us. You're holding on to them and hopefully preserving them for us, but you don't own them. And I'm tired of being in a situation where I need to beg for my own records. That's insane. We need to start changing the dynamic and pushing back. And if they're going to think we're just pushy, too bad. It works. We're legally right and they're legally wrong.
Great. Yeah, I think you've given everyone a lot of advice here. I know I'm picking up a lot and definitely am interested. I know that when you had worked with, I think it was your cousin. Was it your cousin Alexi? I think it was. That was.
Yeah. Okay. A crazy story happened at RootsTech, not this past year, but the year before that. Completely crazy. My background is like, Eastern European Jewish. And I was at RootsTech a year and a half ago, and somebody writes back to me who had written to me over email. I just hadn't gotten around. Hey, I think I matched you on the Krakowski line in so-and-so Ukraine. Like, I got back to you. I'm going to RootsTech. I can't do genealogy. I have to go to RootsTech. And I'm in the lunchroom at RootsTech, the big lunchroom in the back of the expo hall. And he messages me on Facebook Messenger. I've never talked to this person before. And he says, hey, I sent you an email. You didn't write me back, blah, blah, blah. I'm from Krakowski. I'm like, I can't write right now. I'm talking to my friends. I'm at RootsTech. Oh, okay. Well, I'll talk to you. I think we're related. We probably have an ancestor like 1800 in like, backwoods Ukraine, south of Kiev. by the way, I live in Kiev. Like, oh wow, you speak great English. You know, and I'm live in Kiev. He's a young guy too. He could be a total NextGen guy too. I think he's like 30. I had never met him before. And by the way, I'm suing the Ukrainian archives.
Wow.
Holy crap! And there's another one.
Yeah.
And like, wait a minute, let me talk to you about that. So we realized, like, we're very, very, very distant cousins. He's researching his Kharkovsky branch. His family stayed in Ukraine. They never immigrated to America. He's Ukrainian, not Ukrainian American. And he lives in Kiev. He speaks fluent English, speaks and writes. His name is Alex Kharkovsky. He has a tech background, like many of us on this talk do. He went to a tech school, and he loves going to archives and scanning the records and putting them online for free. I'm like, holy crap, you are my cousin of all the people in the world. And so we've talked a lot ever since then, and I've helped him get scanners. This was not an official Reclaim the Records project. This is just my own interest. Like, yeah, that would be amazing to get those online.
Project though, yeah.
Yeah. So he sued the Zhytomyr archives. He put the actual the judicial proceedings on Facebook live stream. I mean, he's got guts, because what he is fighting against is different than what we're fighting against here. We're fighting against archivists who sometimes are really possessive of records for no good reason, or who are just ignorant of the Freedom of Information laws because they've never really had to come up against them before. He's dealing in Ukraine with an archive system where for years, when Ukraine was part of the USSR, the archivists were part of the KGB. They were handpicked, and they all had connections to the security state. And even though Ukraine is now an independent country, that mentality kind of exists. Most of them are mafia, or are connected to the mafia, or connected politically to political figures. They have no archival background or training. One of the things he's doing is he's digging up, like, where did you go to school? What did you study? You have no archival background, yet you have this job and you're telling me I can't have my records. What are you talking about? So he's really uncovering corruption as opposed to just ignorance. And it's so brave and it's so amazing, and he inspires me all the time. And I think if he can take on the Ukrainian archives, I can take on the New York City archives.
You're both genealogy crusaders, so I think we appreciate that. But yeah, I never really realized like how much he was really like up against, though. So the fact that he is doing it, I mean, yeah, bravo. You know, kudos. I'm glad you're able to help them out. You know, you're a distant cousin, so
yeah, very distant, but clearly there's some little genetic thing that came down through the years. Yeah, and there's other people out there too, and it may be someone watching this right now where you have some little county library that's just been terrible about giving access to some book, and maybe the librarian will look at the book, but they won't let you look at the book. But that's your book. Your taxes paid for that book. She's protecting that book. You can look at that book, or she can make a copy of it, and you can pay for the copy, and you can get that copy online. And again, if anyone here gets stuff using these laws, talk to me. I'll show you how to use the Internet Archive, how to upload stuff for free. We can help make you, a little front-end website to it. We'll help. We want to just get more stuff online for free for everyone.
Exactly. Yeah. And I think I'd like to make an official call for, I think all of us should all go out into our towns and cities and see what records are out there that maybe are available, and maybe see if something we can take on. And even if we just get a little record set at a time, it's going to make a difference to finding our ancestors. So I think that we all have a little homework, and we should try to at least see what's out there and just make sure that, we're creating more access for everyone, because not everybody can get to the archives, like you said. So we're all busy, and a lot of us are like young millennials like this, and we have our families, we have our careers, and we at least should have something to start with. We need an index, we need a finding aid, we need something to at least start with, so we're not just starting completely from scratch. And like you said, right, if it's a public record, let's make it public.
Right. I mean, my goal, and this will take years to get there, is that every state in this country, or more than the states, the vital records jurisdictions, of which there are 57, because it's 50 states plus DC plus New York City, which gets treated like a state, plus 5 territories. Every jurisdiction should have at least a birth, marriage, and death index, and ideally divorce index too. Just basic indexes up to a relatively recent year. It doesn't have to have that much information, but at a minimum, that should be available to the public. I mean, obviously there are issues about overly strict rules on like getting an old death certificate, which is insane. Those people are already dead. There's no reason not to get the certificate. But there are also overly strict vital records laws out there, which we also want to fight, and which we have been trying to work against. New York City, of course, one of the worst lately. So we'll work on those too. But at the minimum, I would like every place to have an index online. At least you should know the record exists. Whether you can get it is a second fight.
Exactly. Yeah, I definitely agree with that.
Yeah.
And I think it'll encourage people to go more to the archives if they know there's something there.
I know, and it helps them. They're honestly going to get more records. And I can prove this with a Freedom of Information request, because I have friends who have made Freedom of Information law requests to the New York City Municipal Archive saying, how many records have you sold over the past 5 years, broken down by birth, marriage, and death? And you can see that after our lawsuit, which they fought against so vigorously, the number of marriage records that were purchased and the money went to the archives, they've sold more over the years.
Right.
They often publishing the index. That was the whole point. Why did you fight us on this?
Right, which is great for the archives, because they can keep their staff employed, have a budget, add more people, add more records, digitize more quickly.
And I've had all people say it's much better for them if they get a request that has the actual certificate number or finding number on it, because we publish the index, so they don't have to go look it up. They know immediately I'm getting certificate number 123, and I'm going to send it off, assuming the person is able to get the record. The other thing that's hard for archives is when they have what's called a null request or a null report, where they get a request for John Doe and they have to thoroughly search and then write back, I'm really sorry we couldn't find a John Doe here. He's not in this year in this archive, because they have to be so careful that they're actually looking through everything. It takes up more of their staff time.
Right.
If they publish the index, someone would know ahead of time John Doe is not there. So it helps them in that sense too.
Definitely. So, where can we find you when you're not, off crusading for our records, though? What any conferences that you join or and regularly go to?
I have 2 little kids at home, so I can't leave that often. That's part of the reason I started Reclaim the Records. I go to RootsTech pretty much every year. I am planning to go to RootsTech this coming year. I did speak at NGS this past year, but I was only able to be actually at NGS for like 2.5 days. And then, so 2.5 days, 2 nights, that was it. And I had to turn around and leave in the middle of the conference to come home. I don't know which other ones other than RootsTech I'm going to go to next year. I would like to go to more of them, but again, it's hard to find the time. And that's one of the reasons that sort of is spurring more of the stuff to go online. It's great to see everyone. It's great to learn from classes, but our generation, at least at this stage in our lives, we kind of need to do a lot more stuff online when we can, sometimes after the kids go to bed, things like that. We'll see. We'll see what else I do next year. I can't really talk about much more yet. But I'd love to meet everybody. If you ever see me walking around a conference, come say hi. I love talking to people.
Definitely. Yeah, definitely want to meet up again at RootsTech, and hope you come to our NextGen meetup. I think that would be lovely for other people to meet you as well. So a lot of people really, I think, find a kindred spirit with you with what you're doing. So I think it'd be really nice if you could come out. So where else can we find you on social media? I know you're active on Twitter. Where else are you?
Okay, Reclaim the Records has a Twitter account. We are, of all the places, the most active on Twitter. Because we assume that if you're on Twitter, you tend to sort of be in tune with the Twitter vibe. We're kind of snarky and mean on Twitter, to be honest, because we have to be.
You're not mean. You're sassy. It's okay.
we give back. If someone claps, we clap back. It's being out there. It's just sort of being like, no, we're not going to immediately kiss every archivist's butt who would like to think that they're the savior of their own archive. No, sometimes you guys are the obstructionists. Sometimes that's just how it is. Not everyone. We're also active on Facebook. Reclaim the Records has a Facebook page. We post there less often, and when we do, it tends to be more lengthy. Sometimes it's recapitulating things we've said on Twitter. We also have an email newsletter, which goes out about every 6 weeks. Whenever we have news, it's not that often. It tends to be a little more formal, for people who would like to get this in their inbox of notifications of new records. So we post there too. And of course, we have a website, which we update when we get new records going up. reclaimtherecords.org. Not .com, although .com will forward you, but reclaimtherecords.org. It has a list of here are all the various records requests we've made. As actually, as you may know from this conversation and from Twitter, there are other requests that we have not even stuck on our website yet that are coming to fruition soon, like the Connecticut one I mentioned. That was not originally our request. That was Alec Ferretti being awesome again who made the request. So therefore, we had never put it on our site initially. We will put it on our site once we also launch that record set. We have some federal record sets, our first ever federal FOIA, the federal law that we're going to start using really soon, which we're very excited about. We have a really big record set that we got from NARA, our first ever team up with NARA, first ever nationwide record sets that we got. And that one, Family Search really came through and helped us get that scanned also. And that was incredibly kind of them. So I can't give too many details right now, but it's almost 6 million records. It
Wow.
spans the mid 1800s to the mid 1900s. I'd say most.
I can't wait to see that.
And I should explain how we found out about that. We didn't find out about that from genealogy. When I decided to form Reclaim the Records as an actual org, like a 501c3 nonprofit org, I knew nothing about nonprofits, but I'm learning as I go. And one of the things I learned is you have to have a board of directors. Not just legally you need to have people, but also you need to have people from all different points of view, all different areas of what you're doing so that they can all give their input. I was so lucky. Everybody on our board is like a rock star at what they do, and they've been amazing, and they all said yes right away to join. And one of the people on our board is somebody who's not a genealogist. His name is Jonathan Webb Dice, and he is a military historian who pulls many military-oriented records for genealogists. He's now the head genealogist, I don't know exact title, but something of head genealogist at the Colonial Dames in DC.
Okay.
Yeah, so I mean, he does a lot of stuff, but his love is military records of all wars. I mean, even pre-colonial wars. He knows that sort of stuff. He grew up in DC, so his dad was an archivist at the Smithsonian. So he basically grew up his whole life doing stuff in the archives all over DC, including National Archives. He never worked for the National Archives, but he spends his time in there a ton. And he also has been many times to the National Archives in St. Louis, where a lot of military records found up. And he knew about a record set that nobody knew about, or practically nobody had ever heard of it, but he knew about it. It was not even in the National Archives' own catalog. NARA has a catalog where you're supposed to be able to search at least the existence of record sets. They had never added this one to the catalog. We have a theory as to why. It's possibly because if they knew this was going to get out more, they were going to be processing a ton of requests from a million genealogists, which might happen as soon as we were.
Probably will now, though.
Yeah, it probably will. So they're getting ready for this too. So John told us about it. That's awesome. I like people having all these very diverse backgrounds, from completely different backgrounds from what I have. My background is very narrow and neat. European Jewish going through New York City is very small part of the American genealogy world, or especially the world genealogy world. So there's people like John who do military stuff, and there's people like Megan Smoleniak, who's awesome and does stuff for the Department of Defense and helps repatriate the remains of American soldiers. And there's people like Barbara Matthews who does stuff with colonial era genealogy. We have very wide range. We have Dallin Quast, who's the former CTO of Family Search, and many other friends. And John knew about this record set that was in St. Louis that had not gone into the NARA catalog, very suspiciously. And he mentioned it to us. And so we talked to NARA, and we talked to them, and we talked to Family Search, and we were able to work something out that Family Search had a missionary couple who they incredibly generously, they diverted from a job they were about to go to in El Paso, Texas for scanning things. They delayed them in St. Louis on their road trip south to Texas. They spent about 8 weeks sitting in there scanning the old microfilms of this amazing record set, which is a military-related record set. I don't want to give away more details right now, but I know John has told people.
Can't wait, though. Oh.
I'm sorry, Jen, put it this way. If you had anyone who you think might have been in the military from mid-1800s to the early 1900s, you're going to be a very happy camper very soon.
Excellent. Well, we can't wait. So for all of our followers out there, they're following NextGen and Reclaim the Records, keep an eye on the Twitter account. I think that we'll see some announcements hopefully soon. So
right. And we really, again, we have to thank Family Search for being,
yes.
Thank you. Hands on these little random nonprofit organization, and they recognize too, this is a great set. We should get these. So
that's wonderful.
That was so kind of them. They have been incredibly kind and amazing to deal with us. So shout out to Family Search. Thank you guys.
That's great. Yeah. Are you taking on any more federal sets anytime soon, or?
We have 2 that are probably going to the lawsuit stage pretty soon. Okay. For different reasons. Because in both cases, the federal agencies are being jerks. These are both on our website, these 2. One of them is Social Security has a claims index. It's on Ancestry, which has been for about a couple of years. It's not the Social Security Death Master File, also known as the Social Security Death Index. It's not that one. It's the claims index for people who made claims maybe after their parents passed, things like that. One of the reasons it's very helpful, it doesn't just give mothers maiden names. It can also give, when say the child is claiming for their parents, it may show the daughter's change in her surnames over the years. Again, a great way to loop in new married names over the years. and it's not as big as the SSDI. So again, that actually is on Ancestry already. Usually things we go after are things that nobody has, that no one ever wanted to part with. But in this case, we thought, like, that's a really great record set, but why isn't it free? Like, why isn't that free in the sense of available? Like, why is it, why do I have to pay $300 a year to see something that really should be on data.gov? So we made a request for that one. And right now, where it stands, last time I checked, is Social Security was claiming that they can't give it to us because if you want the Social Security death index, you have to go to such and such organization and ask it from them. So we're like having to explain to them about their own records. Like, no, we're not asking for the death index. I understand why you think we might. We're asking about the such and such records, which are not the death index. So that's what we're trying to straighten out with them. They don't understand their own records. The other one, which is going to a FOIA lawsuit in the near future, is the Veterans Administration or Veterans Affairs, the VA. They have a giant data set called the Burrells death file. Burrells is BIRLS. I believe it stands for Benefits Something Records Locator System. Again, this is something that is already on Ancestry through about 2010. It's 1850 to 2010. We're asking 1852, like the present. Why not? It's a record of every military veteran in American history and what happened to them. When did they die? Like most of them will also have when did you go into the service, when were you removed from the service, when did you die? It's very basic. Again, this is not the same one that we're dealing with from NARA. This is something that's already been out there for a couple of years. And again, we were saying, well, why should there only be one copy of such an amazingly important record with millions and millions of records on all American veterans? Why is it just locked up behind a very expensive paywall? I should point out that, like, I subscribe to every site out there, basically. I'm willing to pay, but not everybody can, and it really adds up. And at a certain point, it makes you feel a little bad, like, well, at least the data part of it, if not the interface, the data, the raw data, really should be free. It came from the government. This wasn't a private group. This is our taxes paid to make that data set. Why isn't there a free copy for download somewhere? So we asked them like over a year ago, like saying, hey, you have this Burrells file here, and we send you the link, and we want a copy too. It seemed very simple. And we've been dealing with the Veterans Administration. They originally said no. Then our attorney wrote to them saying, like, no, I think you really need to take a look at this because we're not going to go away because you said no. And he said, oh, we sent it to the wrong group. We'll send it to the subgroup within Veterans Affairs. Hang on. We sent it to the subgroup. Subgroup came back like within the past month or two saying, this was kind of amazing. They came back to us saying, yeah, okay, we see what you're talking about now. We should never have given that to Ancestry. It was an accidental data breach, and just because we gave it to them, we're not going to give it to you because we're not going to compound the mistake. And our attorney was like, are you kidding me? First of all, it's not a data breach because, first of all, everybody's dead. By definition, it has the word death file in it. Right. Second of all, there is still, you have to weigh the public interest. There's a public interest, not just genealogy public interest. There's a public interest in knowing what happened to American veterans, and then cross-referencing that, say, with how they did with healthcare outcomes or causes of death or how long they lived, or how about gender, women in the military. I mean, there's many reasons you could say that they balance that. Furthermore, I don't see why it's wrong that you gave it out before. Just because you gave it out before, like that means it's public now. So if it was something overly private, like gory autopsy photos or something, obviously that's no. But this is just a basic database, and most of these people died a long time ago, some of them a century ago. So that's going to go to a lawsuit in the near future. It'll be our first FOIA lawsuit, our first federal FOIA lawsuit. I'm so excited.
Order for you.
Thanks. And so I have never done a FOIA lawsuit before. Like, I'm learning as I go. I don't have some special well of information for any of these things we've done. I just wanted to try them. And so we're trying for this. And we want to keep pushing. We want to keep pushing in all different states. We want to keep pushing till there's an index for everything. We want to find major databases that have never been online, like the one that we're putting online soon from NARA, which is going to be amazing. We want to push for big data sets that are really very helpful to everybody, but it just seems wrong that they're only available for pay for certain websites. That doesn't seem fair. You should have a downloadable version somewhere else. Just, most people are not going to download it because it's going to overwhelm your Excel when you try to open it, but it should exist. It's our public data. We paid for it. That's sort of what we're looking at.
That's great.
Yeah.
Well, this has been a really wonderful chat, and I've seen such a wonderful conversation going across in the group chat, everything. I mean, everyone I think is just really enthralled and just understanding and hearing what your process was and hearing what your journey was to get there. And it sounds like, we all can do it too, so we can definitely help you. And I think that, we just want to say kudos for just, paving the way and really just bringing all these record sets out and really just bringing more attention to it. I think it's getting a lot more attention now, even at conferences. I feel like we're seeing more talking about access to records and archives and everything else too.
Right. So we all need to sort of push back because there's a lot of great ways now. Like there's great websites out there. All of these, even the ones that annoy me sometimes, they're very useful. They cross-reference data sets. The more data they have, the more they can find the connections. They have lovely interfaces. They have ways to message other people. But that's sort of like the lettuce and the tomato on the sandwich. They're not the important part. The important part, the meat, is the record. The record is what we build everything else on. Not the family story necessarily, but the record. The records are what we do. They're the foundation, and we need access to them for everyone, for the public. If they came from a public source, if our taxes paid for them, they should be available freely. Most people still won't use the free version. They'll probably use a version that makes it more integrated. It cross-references the records and has a nicer interface. That's fine, but the record itself needs to be available, and it also needs to be preserved. It amazes me in 2018 that there are so many records, for example, in New York City, not to beat a dead horse, that have never been anywhere else. There is no digital version. There is no backup copy. God forbid something else happens to that area or to that building. It's gone. There's nothing else. They never sent a copy up to the state level or something. We've sent records to Albany. When we're done with our microfilms and we've scanned everything and put them online, we donate those films because I don't want them sitting around my house. I mean, they're piling up in my hallway. So I sent them to the library in Albany twice. I've sent records to NEHGS recently. Hi, David. I've sent records, the Wyoming records, when I got them scanned, I sent them to the Laramie County Library. We're kind of making backups as we go by doing this.
That's great.
It appalls me that these places are not doing it on their own, and it makes me so nervous. And that's really one of the things that's driving this too. It's not just wanting to find my own records, wanting to find family records, wanting to look at sociology or history or whatever. It's also like you need to be digitizing those or photographing those. And I'll help pay for them, but you have to be doing this, and that not doing this is really irresponsible.
Well said.
Yeah.
Well said. Well, thank you so much for this interview. It was really great, and I think we all learned a lot. And I think the key takeaway we have is let's preserve history. That's really what we're doing. This is our history. This is our ancestors. These are people that that helped create our country that we are now. And I think that was only keep preserving it and going after records. I think that ultimately we're just going to learn a lot more about ourselves, which will be really nice. So thank you so much for this interview, Brooke. And anybody that wants to help reclaim the records, they are a nonprofit. So if you want to send them some love, send them some of your coffee money. They're a nonprofit. I think that they would love a donation in case they need any help with that. And they usually, get involved in Giving Tuesday. And contact Brooke if you need help and you want to help her out, or you want help with your requests. It sounds like you're very willing to help. So so get out there, find out what the records are, and let's go save them. So thank you.
Thank you.
So thank you for another great episode of Faces of NextGen Live. This is Melanie McComb from NextGen Genealogy Network signing off. Have a good night.